begin far from the thunder of cannon fire, on the rugged island of Corsica, where the wind carries the scent of salt and wild herbs across the hills. Here, in 1769, Napoleon Bonaparte is born into a modest family of minor nobility. The island itself feels restless, only recently passed from Genoese to French control, and its people hold tightly to a fierce sense of identity. You can almost sense how this environment, proud, defiant, and uncertain, settles quietly into the boy's character. His father, Carlo, is ambitious but burdened by the limits of his status. His mother, Letizia, is resolute and disciplined, shaping the household with a firm hand. You watch as young Napoleon grows in this atmosphere of constraint and aspiration, absorbing both hardship and expectation. He is not yet the figure history will remember, but there is already a distance in him, a tendency to observe rather than belong. At the age of 9, he leaves Corsica for mainland France. The journey itself feels like a quiet rupture. In the military schools of France, he is an outsider, his accent mocked, his manners judged. Yet this isolation sharpens him. You see him retreat into study, into mathematics and history, into the orderly certainty of artillery science. While others seek companionship, he seeks control, discipline, and understanding. Around him, Europe trembles with change. The old structures of monarchy and privilege begin to crack under the pressure of ideas that speak of equality and revolution. By the time the French Revolution erupts, Napoleon is no longer just a student. He is an officer, young and observant, standing at the edge of transformation. You feel the weight of this moment as he watches the collapse of the familiar world. The revolution does not simply create opportunity, it demands it. Advancement no longer depends solely on birth, but on ability, loyalty, and timing. Napoleon understands this instinctively. Where others see chaos, he sees a path. His early assignments are unremarkable, yet you can sense a quiet accumulation of experience. He studies fortifications, logistics, the movement of men and guns. He reads constantly, drawing lessons from the campaigns of past commanders. There is a patience in him, but it is not passive. It is the patience of someone waiting for the exact moment to act. That moment begins to take shape during the siege of Toulon. Here, you witness the first clear glimpse of his talent. He does not simply follow orders. He reimagines the battlefield, identifying positions others overlook. His success brings recognition, promotion, and the attention of powerful figures within the revolutionary government. It is as though the slow, deliberate preparation of his early years suddenly condenses into a single, decisive movement. And yet, even as his name begins to circulate, his position remains uncertain. The revolution is volatile, and fortunes rise and fall quickly. You feel the tension in these years, the sense that everything is provisional, that success today may vanish tomorrow. Napoleon himself seems aware of this fragility. He moves carefully, aligning himself with shifting political currents while maintaining his focus on military command. By the mid-1790s, France stands surrounded by enemies. Monarchies across Europe fear the spread of revolutionary ideas and form alliances to contain them. Among these conflicts, one theater seems almost secondary: northern Italy. The army of Italy is poorly supplied, poorly regarded, and largely overlooked by the government in Paris. It is here, unexpectedly, that Napoleon is given command in 1796. You can sense the quiet significance of this appointment. He is young only, 26, and largely untested at such a scale. To some, it seems a risk. To others, perhaps a convenient assignment for an ambitious officer whose potential is not yet fully understood. As you follow him south toward the Italian front, the atmosphere shifts. The landscape changes, the stakes sharpen, and the slow rhythm of preparation gives way to the urgency of action. Napoleon himself appears transformed. The reserved student and calculating officer now steps into a role that demands not only intelligence but authority, presence, and vision. He addresses his troopsmen who are hungry, poorly equipped, and weary, yet his words carry a strange energy. He speaks not only of victory but of opportunity, of glory, of the riches of Italy waiting beyond the mountains. You can feel the effect ripple through the ranks. It is not simply what he says, but how he says it with certainty, with conviction, as though the future is already decided. In this moment, standing at the threshold of the Italian campaign, you begin to understand the convergence of forces that have shaped him. The isolation of Corsica, the discipline of French education, the upheaval of revolution, the early tests of command, all of it gathers into a single point. The campaign ahead will test every aspect of his character. It will demand speed, adaptability, and relentless focus. It will place him against experienced Austrian forces and the complexities of coalition warfare. But as you watch him prepare, there is little hesitation. Instead, there is a quiet, steady confidence, as if he has been moving toward this moment all along. And as the army begins to move, winding its way through the harsh terrain of northern Italy, you sense that something larger is unfolding, not just a military campaign, but the beginning of a transformation that will echo far beyond these distant fields. The story does not rush forward. It unfolds slowly, step by step, as Napoleon leads his army into a theater that will soon reshape both his destiny and that of Europe itself. You move with him now into northern Italy, where the air feels heavier, charged with uncertainty and expectation. The army of Italy is not what you might imagine for such a moment. It is underfed, underpaid, and uneven in discipline. Many of the soldiers march in worn boots, their uniforms faded by time and neglect. Yet, as Napoleon Bonaparte takes command, something subtle begins to shift, not in their supplies, which remain scarce, but in their sense of purpose. He studies the map not as a static image, but as a living system. Rivers, mountains, roads, each becomes a line of possibility. Opposing him are Austrian forces and their allies, experienced and confident, spread across positions that seem, at first glance, difficult to break. But you notice how Napoleon does not intend to meet them in a slow, grinding confrontation. Instead, he looks for separation, for the gaps between armies, for the moments when coordination fails. The campaign begins in the spring of 1796. Movement is constant, almost restless. Rather than advancing in a single heavy line, he divides and concentrates his forces with precision, striking where the enemy is weakest. You feel the rhythm of it: advance, strike, withdraw, and advance again. It is not chaos, though it may appear so to those facing him. It is calculation carried out at speed. At Battle of Montenotte, you witness the first clear demonstration of this approach. French forces move quickly to isolate an Austrian detachment, overwhelming it before reinforcements can arrive. The victory is not merely tactical. It sets a pattern. Napoleon is not seeking a single decisive clash, but a series of rapid, contained victories that unravel the enemy's structure piece by piece. The soldiers begin to notice. Where once there was doubt, there is now a growing belief, not only in their commander, but in the possibility of success. Napoleon reinforces this belief with words as well as action. His proclamations are direct, vivid, almost intimate. He speaks of honor, of the fertile plains ahead, of the rewards that await them. You sense that he understands morale as deeply as strategy. As the campaign unfolds, the geography itself becomes a participant. The narrow passes of the Alps, the winding rivers, the scattered towns of northern Italy all shape the movement of armies. Yet Napoleon seems to move through these constraints with unusual ease, as though he anticipates them before they arise. He pushes his troops hard, demanding speed and endurance. But he also shares in their hardships, maintaining a presence that feels both distant and immediate. At Battle of Lodi, the tension sharpens. The Austrian army attempts to hold a defensive position across a bridge, their artillery commanding the approach. For a moment, the advance hesitates. The situation appears precarious, even dangerous. But Napoleon presses forward, urging his men into the crossing. The assault is fierce, chaotic, and costly, yet it succeeds. You sense that something changes here not only in the army, but in Napoleon himself. The victory at Lodi becomes more than a military achievement. It becomes a moment of realization. He begins to see his own capacity in a new light, to understand that boldness, when combined with timing, can overcome even well-prepared defenses. The campaign does not slow. Victories follow in rapid succession, each building upon the last. Austrian forces are pushed back, their lines disrupted, their plans forced into reaction rather than initiative. You observe how Napoleon maintains pressure, never allowing the enemy the time to recover or reorganize fully. Yet beneath this momentum, there is constant strain. Supplies remain uncertain, communication fragile, and the risk of overextension always present. You can feel the tension in every decision. A miscalculation, a delay, a failure of coordination, any of these could reverse the fragile advantage he has created. Despite this, Napoleon continues to act with confidence. He delegates authority where necessary, trusting his subordinates to execute complex maneuvers. At the same time, he retains a clear sense of the overall design, ensuring that each movement contributes to a broader objective. It is this balance between control and flexibility that gives his campaign its distinctive character. As you move with the army deeper into Italy, the political dimension begins to emerge more clearly. Victories on the battlefield translate into influence beyond it. Local governments shift, alliances weaken, and the authority of France extends further into the region. Napoleon is no longer simply a general executing orders. He is shaping outcomes that carry diplomatic and strategic consequences. You begin to see how this campaign is not confined to military success alone. It is a demonstration of capability, a signal to both allies and enemies that a new kind of leadership has emerged. Napoleon's name travels ahead of him, carried by reports of his victories, by the reactions of those who have faced him, and yet the pace never truly slows. Each success creates new challenges, new expectations, new risks. The Austrians regroup, adjusting their strategies, seeking to contain this rapid advance. The campaign becomes a contest not only of strength, but of adaptation as the months pass. You sense the accumulation of experience each battle, each decision adding to a growing confidence that is no longer tentative. Napoleon moves with increasing assurance, his vision of the campaign becoming clearer, more expansive by the time the army secures its position across much of northern Italy. The transformation is unmistakable. What began as a precarious command of a neglected force has become a sequence of victories that reshape the balance of power. And as you stand with him at this stage of the campaign, looking out over the territories now under French influence, you realize that this is more than a military achievement. It is the moment in which Napoleon Bonaparte steps fully into prominence, no longer a promising officer, but a figure whose actions command attention across Europe. The campaign continues, but the trajectory is already clear. The quiet, disciplined preparation of his early life has given way to decisive action, and that action is beginning to echo far beyond the Italian plains. You remain with him as the campaign deepens, and by now the rhythm of movement and decision feels almost continuous, like a current that never fully stills. Each victory adds not only territory, but weight, political, symbolic, and personal. Napoleon Bonaparte is no longer simply commanding an army. He is shaping a narrative that stretches back toward France and outward across Europe. You begin to notice how reports from Italy travel north, carried by couriers and newspapers, reshaped into stories that elevate his name. In Paris, the government, still fragile, still uncertain, watches closely. Success on distant battlefields brings stability at home, and Napoleon's victories begin to serve a purpose beyond the immediate war. They become proof that the revolution can defend itself, that it can prevail against established monarchies. Here, in Italy, that broader meaning is less visible but deeply felt. The army continues to move, pressing against Austrian resistance that grows more determined with each engagement. At Battle of Castiglione, you witness how Napoleon confronts a regrouped enemy force. The Austrians attempt to regain initiative, to disrupt the momentum that has carried the French this far. The battle unfolds with a familiar pattern, yet each time it feels newly precarious. Napoleon shifts his forces with precision, drawing the enemy into positions where they can be divided and overwhelmed. You sense the strain beneath the execution, the constant need to anticipate, to react, to commit at exactly the right moment. When the French prevail, it is not through overwhelming strength, but through coordination and timing that seem just a fraction more exact than their opponents. With each success, Napoleon's authority grows not only over his troops, but over the broader conduct of the campaign. He negotiates with local rulers, imposes contributions, and reorganizes territories. These actions blur the line between military command and political leadership. You begin to understand that this campaign is not only forging his reputation as a general, but as something more complex and consequential. There is also a shift within the army itself. The soldiers, once uncertain and weary, now carry themselves differently. Victory has changed their expectations. They march not merely to survive, but to win. Napoleon reinforces this transformation with carefully chosen words, addressing them as partners in success, as participants in a shared destiny. His proclamations are not long, but they are deliberate, designed to sustain momentum and belief. Yet beneath this growing confidence, the challenges remain constant. Supplies must still be secured, often from the very lands the army passes through. Communication across distances is slow and vulnerable. The Austrians, though repeatedly defeated, are not broken. They adapt, sending new commanders, adjusting their strategies, seeking opportunities to reverse their losses. At Battle of Arcueil, the tension reaches a different intensity. The terrain itself becomes an obstacle. Marshes, narrow causeways, and limited space restrict movement. The battle is confused, fragmented, and at times uncertain. You feel how close it comes to slipping beyond control. Napoleon responds, not only with strategy, but with presence. He moves near the front, visible to his troops, urging them forward in moments when hesitation threatens to spread. There is risk in this, undeniable risk, but it carries a powerful effect. The soldiers see him not as a distant commander, but as a figure willing to share the danger. When victory comes, it is hard-won and incomplete, yet its impact is profound. It reinforces the perception that Napoleon can prevail even in the most difficult conditions, that setbacks can be absorbed and turned into renewed effort. You begin to see how his reputation is not built solely on success, but on resilience, the ability to sustain momentum despite uncertainty. As the campaign continues into the winter months, the pace slows slightly, but the pressure does not ease. The Austrians prepare another effort to regain control, concentrating their forces in a final attempt to break the French position. You sense the significance of what is coming, not just another battle, but a test of whether the gains of the campaign can be secured. Throughout this period, Napoleon's correspondence reveals another dimension of his leadership. He writes constantly to the government in Paris, to his generals, to administrators in occupied territories. These letters are precise, often urgent, reflecting a mind that is always engaged, always calculating the next step. You can almost feel the continuous flow of thought behind them, the refusal to let any detail remain unattended. At the same time, his confidence deepens. The early caution you sensed at the beginning of the campaign has given way to a more assured perspective. He trusts his judgment, his methods, and increasingly, his own sense of destiny. This is not yet the full expression of ambition that will define his later years, but its outline is beginning to appear. The campaign in Italy, which once seemed peripheral, has become central. It has drawn the attention of Europe, disrupted established alliances, and demonstrated a new approach to warfare, one that emphasizes speed, flexibility, and decisive concentration of force. You realize that what is unfolding here is not only a series of battles, but a shift in how war itself is conducted. As you stand at this point in the narrative, watching the army prepare for what may be the final phase of the campaign, there is a sense of convergence. The victories, the hardships, the adaptations, all of it leads toward a decisive conclusion. And in Napoleon himself, you see the transformation more clearly than ever. The young officer, shaped by Corsica and the revolution, has become a commanding presence, capable of influencing not only the outcome of battles, but the direction of nations. The Italian campaign is not yet finished, but its impact is already unmistakable. It has forged authority through action, through persistence, through a series of choices made under pressure. And as the next confrontation approaches, you understand that what lies ahead will determine not only the fate of the campaign, but the extent of the power Napoleon is beginning to claim. You move deeper into the campaign's final phase, where victory is no longer a question of bold beginnings, but of endurance. The early momentum has carried Napoleon Bonaparte far across northern Italy. Yet now, the strain of sustained war becomes unmistakable. The army is stretched across difficult terrain, its supply lines thin and unreliable. Hunger lingers at the edges of every march, and exhaustion settles into the rhythm of daily movement. You begin to understand that brilliance alone is not enough to sustain a campaign. It must be supported by systems, food, ammunition, communication, all of which are fragile in this environment. Napoleon compensates not by slowing down, but by adapting. He reorganizes logistics, demands contributions from occupied territories, and ensures that movement remains the army's greatest advantage. To stop here would be to invite collapse. The Austrians, learning from earlier defeats, return with renewed determination. Their commanders attempt to coordinate multiple forces, hoping to overwhelm the French through sheer pressure. You can feel the tension rising again, not as a sudden shock, but as a gradual tightening. The campaign has entered a stage where mistakes will carry heavier consequences. It is in this atmosphere that you approach the decisive struggle near Rivoli. The landscape is steep and broken, a series of ridges and narrow approaches that complicate any large movement of troops. Here, the Austrian army seeks to break through, to reclaim control and reverse the course of the campaign. At the Battle of Rivoli, you witness Napoleon at a different level of command. The situation is complex, with enemy forces approaching from multiple directions. There is no single, clear line of battle. Instead, there are fragment columns advancing, positions threatened, opportunities appearing and disappearing in rapid succession. Napoleon responds with a clarity that feels almost unnatural under such pressure. He identifies the critical points, concentrating his forces where they can have the greatest effect. You see how he uses the terrain itself, positioning artillery to dominate key approaches, directing infantry to hold and counterattack at precisely the right moments. The battle unfolds over hours that seem to stretch and compress at the same time. At certain moments, it appears that the Austrian forces might succeed, that their numbers and persistence will break through. But each time, Napoleon adjusts, reinforcing a position, redirecting a unit, maintaining a balance that never quite tips against him. What strikes you most is not only the outcome, but the method. This is warfare conducted as a dynamic system, where movement, timing, and coordination replace rigid structure. Napoleon does not simply react. He anticipates, shaping the battle as it unfolds. The victory at Rivoli is decisive, not because it destroys the enemy entirely, but because it removes their ability to continue the campaign effectively. Yet, even in victory, the cost is visible. The soldiers are worn, their strength tested by months of continuous effort. You can see it in their faces, in the slower pace of their movements once the immediate urgency passes. Napoleon recognizes this, but he also understands that the campaign cannot pause indefinitely. The advantage must be secured before it fades. Beyond the battlefield, the political landscape continues to shift. The weakening of Austrian control in Italy creates new possibilities for France. Territories are reorganized, alliances reconsidered, and the influence of the French Republic expands. Napoleon plays an active role in this transformation, negotiating terms, shaping outcomes, and ensuring that military success translates into lasting change. You begin to see how innovation in this campaign extends beyond tactics. It includes the integration of military and political objectives, the ability to operate across multiple dimensions at once. Napoleon is not only winning battles, he is redefining what those victories mean. There is also a growing sense of inevitability. The Austrians, despite their efforts, are losing coherence. Their attempts to regroup are slower, less effective. The initiative remains firmly with Napoleon, who continues to press forward, ensuring that no opportunity for recovery is allowed, and yet the uncertainty never fully disappears. Each movement carries risk, each decision a potential consequence that cannot be entirely predicted. You feel this underlying tension even in moments of success. It is the nature of the campaign itself, fast, fluid, and unforgiving. As the final stages approach, the cumulative effect of months of warfare becomes clear. The French army, once dismissed as secondary, has reshaped the strategic balance in Italy. The Austrians, once confident, are now forced into negotiation, their position weakened beyond repair. You stand, at this point, aware that the campaign is nearing its conclusion, and reflect on what has brought it here. It is not a single victory, nor a single idea, but a continuous process of adaptation. Napoleon has responded to hardship not by retreating, but by evolving, adjusting his methods, refining his approach, maintaining momentum where others might have faltered. The Italian campaign, in this phase, reveals its full complexity. It is not simply a story of triumph, but of sustained effort under pressure, of innovation born from necessity. And within it, Napoleon emerges not only as a bold commander, but as a figure capable of navigating the intricate demands of modern warfare. As the final negotiations begin to take shape, you sense that the end is close. But the significance of what has been achieved extends far beyond the immediate outcome. It has established a pattern, a way of thinking and acting that will carry forward into future campaigns. And as you follow Napoleon through these closing moments, you understand that this is not an ending, but a transition one that will carry him from the fields of Italy back toward France, and toward a role that is still only beginning to take form. You arrive now at the closing movement of the campaign, where momentum begins to settle into consequence. The victories won by Napoleon Bonaparte have done more than secure territory. They have altered the structure of the war itself. The coalition that once stood against France, a union of monarchies determined to contain revolutionary change, has begun to fracture under sustained pressure. The Austrian Empire, the central force opposing Napoleon in Italy, is no longer able to maintain its position. Its armies have been driven back, its resources strained, its strategies repeatedly disrupted. You sense a shift not only in military terms, but in perception. What once seemed like a stable balance of power now feels uncertain, as though the assumptions that governed European politics are quietly dissolving. Napoleon understands this moment with clarity. He does not simply pursue the retreating enemy. He shapes the conditions under which they must respond. His advance toward the Austrian heartlands is measured, deliberate, carrying both threat and negotiation. Each step forward increases pressure, not only on the battlefield, but at the diplomatic table. You follow him as he pushes beyond Italy, crossing into territories that bring the conflict closer to Vienna itself. The psychological effect is unmistakable. The war is no longer distant for Austria. It is immediate, pressing, and increasingly difficult to sustain. Napoleon uses this proximity carefully, balancing aggression with the possibility of settlement. At the same time, the French army continues to operate under the same constraints that have defined the campaign. Supplies remain uncertain, and the risk of overextension grows as distances increase. You feel the tension in this phase more acutely. Victory has created opportunity, but also vulnerability. A misstep now could undo much of what has been achieved, yet Napoleon maintains control of the narrative. His correspondence with the French government reflects a growing confidence, even independence. He negotiates directly with Austrian representatives, shaping terms that extend beyond his original mandate. In doing so, he demonstrates a willingness to act not just as a general, but as a political actor in his own right. The culmination of these efforts comes with the Treaty of Campo Formio. You observe how this agreement formalizes what the campaign has already made clear. Austria withdraws from the conflict. ceding territories and recognizing French influence in key regions. The First Coalition, once a formidable alliance, effectively collapses under the weight of these concessions. There is a quiet finality to this moment. It is not marked by a single dramatic event, but by a gradual recognition that the struggle has reached its conclusion. The campaign that began with uncertainty and risk now ends with a decisive shift in European power. For Napoleon, this outcome carries profound implications. His success has elevated him far beyond the expectations that accompanied his appointment. He is no longer simply a capable commander. He is a figure whose decisions have reshaped international relations. You can sense how this realization begins to influence his perspective, expanding his sense of what is possible among the soldiers. The conclusion of the campaign brings a mixture of relief and reflection. They have endured months of hardship, constant movement, and repeated battles. Now, as the immediate pressure eases, the cost of that effort becomes more visible. Yet it is accompanied by a sense of accomplishment that is difficult to ignore. They have participated in something larger than themselves, something that will be remembered in the territories affected by the campaign. The changes are equally significant. Old structures have been disrupted, new administrations established, and the influence of revolutionary ideas extended. The Italian states, once divided and contested, now reflect a different balance of power, one shaped directly by Napoleon's actions. You begin to see how the campaign's impact extends in multiple directions. Militarily, it has demonstrated a new approach to warfare. Politically, it has strengthened France's position while weakening its enemies. Personally, it has transformed Napoleon into a central figure in European affairs. And yet, there is also a sense that this is only a beginning. The skills he has displayed, the authority he has acquired, the confidence he has developed, all of these point toward future ambitions. The Italian campaign has provided not only success, but a foundation upon which something larger can be built. As preparations begin for his return to France, you sense the anticipation that surrounds him. Reports of his victories have already shaped public perception. He is expected not merely as a general returning from war, but as a hero, a symbol of national strength and possibility. The road back carries a different weight than the one that led into Italy. Then, he was an unproven commander stepping into uncertainty. Now, he returns as the architect of a campaign that has altered the course of the war. And as you follow him on this journey, you understand that the conclusion of the Italian campaign is not an ending, but a transition, one that will carry Napoleon into a new phase of his life, where the boundaries between military achievement and political power will become increasingly difficult to separate. You follow him now as he turns back toward France, leaving behind the fields and towns that have defined the Italian campaign. The movement feels quieter than before, yet heavier with meaning. The urgency of battle has given way to reflection, and in that stillness, the scale of what has been accomplished begins to settle more fully into view. Napoleon Bonaparte does not return as he left. When he first crossed into Italy, he carried promise, ambition, and uncertainty. Now, he carries proof of victory, of leadership, of a capacity to shape events on a continental scale. His name precedes him, carried by reports, by rumor, by the careful construction of reputation that has taken place alongside the campaign itself. As you move with him, you sense how deliberately this reputation is managed. Bulletins from the army, proclamations sent back to Paris, accounts of battles, all have contributed to a narrative in which Napoleon stands at the center. His victories are not presented as isolated events, but as expressions of vision and control. It is a subtle but powerful transformation, from commander to symbol. In Paris, the government of the Directory waits. It is a regime marked by instability, its authority dependent on fragile alliances and shifting public opinion. The success of the Italian campaign has strengthened its position, yet it has also introduced a new dynamic. Napoleon's achievements give him influence that does not flow directly from political office. It is influence earned through action, through results that cannot easily be dismissed or contained. You begin to notice a quiet tension beneath the surface of his return. He is welcomed, celebrated, praised, but also observed. Those in power recognize both his value and his potential. A general who can defeat Austria and reshape Italy is an asset, but also a figure who exists slightly outside the structures they control. Napoleon himself seems aware of this balance. He moves carefully, presenting himself as loyal to the Republic while maintaining the independence that has defined his campaign. His words are measured, his public demeanor composed. Yet beneath this restraint, you can sense a growing awareness of his own position and understanding that he now operates on a different level. The Italian campaign has given him more than victory. It has given him confidence in his judgment, in his methods, and increasingly in his role within history. You see it not in overt declarations, but in the way he carries himself, in the assurance with which he engages both military and political matters. There is also a shift in how others respond to him. Officers who once saw him as a peer now regard him with a degree of distance. Politicians weigh their words more carefully in his presence. Even the public, whose admiration is genuine, contributes to this transformation by elevating him into something larger than an individual. And yet, the memory of the campaign remains close. You can still trace the path through Corsica to the plains of Italy, through the early uncertainties to the decisive victories. Each stage has contributed to the figure who now stands at the center of attention. The Treaty of Campo Formio has secured peace with Austria, at least for the moment. The first coalition has been broken, its unity undone by the very campaign you have followed. Europe, though not at rest, is forced to reconsider its approach. France is no longer merely resisting. It is shaping the balance of power. In this altered landscape, Napoleon occupies a unique position. He is not yet the ruler he will become, but the path toward that future has begun to reveal itself. The combination of military success, political awareness, and personal ambition forms a foundation that is both powerful and unstable. You sense that the qualities which defined the Italian campaign speed, adaptability, decisive action will not remain confined to the battlefield. They will extend into other arenas, influencing decisions that reach far beyond the movement of armies. As he settles back into life in France, there is no true pause. Plans begin to form, new possibilities considered. The campaign in Italy has demonstrated what can be achieved under the right conditions. It has also raised expectations, both his own and those of the nation. You reflect on how quickly this transformation has occurred. In just over a year, Napoleon has moved from relative obscurity to central prominence. The campaign that was once seen as secondary has become the defining event of his early career, the moment in which potential became reality. And yet, for all its significance, it remains only a beginning. The patterns established here, the blending of military and political strategy, the use of narrative alongside action, the reliance on speed and precision will carry forward into everything that follows. As you stand at this point, looking back over the Italian campaign, the story feels complete in one sense, yet open in another. It has a clear arc, from uncertainty to dominance, from obscurity to recognition. But it also points beyond itself, toward a future that is already taking shape. Napoleon's return is not an end, but a threshold. The quiet roads leading back to France mark the transition from one phase of his life to the next. And as you watch him move forward, you understand that the rise you have witnessed is only the first movement in a much larger story, one that will continue to unfold across Europe, carrying with it the same intensity, the same ambition, and the same enduring sense of purpose.